A Werewolf Shifter Romance, written by Amelia Hart. Chapter 1. Stolen Moonlight. 3 months have passed since my daughter Mabel was born, and 12 days have passed since she was taken from me. The words echo in my mind like a mantra of anguish, each repetition carving deeper into my soul. I stand at the window of our bedroom in Raven's Ridge, watching dawn break over the mountains that once felt like sanctuary, but now seem like prison walls. My reflection stares back from the glass. Hollow, green-gray eyes, dark circles beneath them telling the story of sleepless nights. Shoulder-length brown hair pulled back in a messy knot that I haven't bothered to fix in days. 12 days. 288 hours. 17,280 minutes since my daughter was ripped from my arms by forces I still don't understand. Behind me, I hear Caspian's measured breathing falter as he wakes. Even in sleep, he's been restless these past weeks, his alpha instincts on constant alert. The mate bond we share thrums with his immediate awareness of my distress, a connection that's become both comfort and torture. Through it, I feel his guilt, his rage, his desperate love for both Mabel and me. Sophie. His voice is rough with exhaustion and grief. Come back to bed. I don't turn around. I can't bear to see the same helpless fury in his blue, almost black eyes that's been there since the night our world shattered. I can still feel her, I whisper, my breath fogging the cold glass. Through whatever connection we share as mother and daughter. She's alive, Caspian. She's scared, but she's alive. The mattress creaks as he rises, and moments later his arms encircle me from behind. His warmth seeps through the thin fabric of my nightgown, but it can't touch the ice that's settled in my chest. At 24, I'd thought I understood loss. I'd buried my parents, survived foster care, built a life from nothing. But this is different. This is a piece of my soul walking around in the world without me, vulnerable and alone. We'll find her, Caspian murmurs against my hair. The same promise he's made every day since the attack. I swear to you, we'll bring her home. I want to believe him. I need to believe him. But as Luna of the Western Territories, I've learned that some promises are beyond even an Alpha King's power to keep. Let me tell you how we got here. How the happiness we'd built so carefully came crashing down in a single night. 3 months ago, Mabel entered the world during a snowstorm that seemed to shake the very foundations of Raven's Ridge. Dr. Martinez had warned us that the birth of a healer-alpha hybrid would be unlike anything in recorded shifter history, but nothing could have prepared us for the reality. The labor lasted 18 hours, during which my healing abilities went haywire, alternately accelerating and fighting the natural process. Caspian never left my side, lending me his strength through our bond while Owen coordinated with the medical team. When Mabel finally arrived, she came into the world glowing with an ethereal light that made everyone in the room gasp. She was perfect. 7 pounds, 2 ounces of pure miracle, with Caspian's dark hair and my green-gray eyes. But it was the warmth that radiated from her tiny body that marked her as something extraordinary. Dr. Martinez later theorized that Mabel had inherited not just my healing abilities and Caspian's alpha strength, but something entirely new. A power that combined and amplified both bloodlines. The first sign of her gifts came when she was only 6 weeks old. I'd brought her to one of our healing centers for a routine checkup when an injured wolf was brought in, barely clinging to life after a territorial dispute. Mabel had been sleeping in my arms, but the moment we entered the treatment room, she woke and began reaching toward the wounded animal. When I moved closer, allowing her tiny hand to brush against the wolf's fur, the change was instantaneous. Light poured from her fingers, and the animal's wounds began closing at a rate that amazed even me. Within minutes, injuries that should have taken weeks to heal were completely gone. Word of that incident spread through the shifter community faster than wildfire. Suddenly, every pack leader on the continent wanted to meet the miracle child. Some came bearing gifts and offers of alliance. Others arrived with barely concealed hunger in their eyes, studying Mabel as if she were a prize to be won rather than a child to be protected. Caspian had increased security around Raven's Ridge after that, but we'd both believed our home was impregnable. The compound had withstood attacks from human organizations, rogue shifters, and supernatural threats. We had hundreds of pack members, state-of-the-art security systems, and protective wards that had been strengthened by some of the most powerful mystics on the continent. We were wrong. The attack came on a Tuesday night in early autumn, when the first frost had begun painting the mountain peaks silver. Caspian and I had been called to an emergency council meeting in the main building. Reports of unusual activity from several neighboring territories that required immediate attention. It was the kind of crisis that demanded both our presence, and we'd reluctantly left Mabel in the care of our most trusted guards. Luna, our friend who'd helped me adjust to life at Raven's Ridge, was supposed to be watching her. 3 other shifters, all seasoned warriors, had been stationed around our private quarters. The entire compound was on high alert, with patrol teams circling the perimeter every 20 minutes. It wasn't enough. The investigation later revealed how thoroughly we had been infiltrated. Someone with intimate knowledge of our protective wards had been systematically weakening them over weeks, using a device that could temporarily neutralize supernatural barriers. The attack wasn't opportunistic. It was surgical, timed precisely for the 15-minute window when our patrol routes created a blind spot near the residential quarter. 3 of our own security protocols had been turned against us by someone who knew exactly how our defenses operated. The first sign of trouble came through the compound's communication system. Static where there should have been regular check-ins from the guard posts. Owen noticed it first, his expression shifting from mild concern to alarm as he tried to raise our home security team on the radio. "Something's wrong," he'd said, standing abruptly from the conference table. "I'm not getting responses from the house." Caspian and I were already moving before Owen finished speaking, our alpha instincts screaming danger. We ran through the compound's corridors, other pack members falling in behind us as word spread that something had happened at the alpha residence. The front door stood ajar, a sight that made my blood turn to ice. Inside, we found Luna unconscious on the living room floor, alive but badly injured. 2 of the guards were similarly incapacitated, hurt but breathing. The third was nowhere to be found. Mabel's nursery was empty, her crib still warm but vacant. A window had been forced open, the protective wards around it somehow neutralized. On the floor lay a single black feather, but whether it was a calling card or simply coincidence, none of us could say. The search began immediately. Every available pack member spread out across the mountain, following scent trails that seemed to vanish into thin air. Caspian shifted into his massive wolf form and led hunting parties through the forest, while I used my heightened senses to search for any trace of our daughter's unique energy signature. We found nothing. It was as if Mabel had simply vanished from existence. The first ransom demand came 3 days later, not for money or territory, but for something far more valuable. The anonymous message, delivered by a human courier who claimed to know nothing about its origins, contained a single sentence: "The child will be returned when you understand what you've truly created." No demands, no negotiations, no clear indication of who had taken her or why. Since then, we followed every lead, chased every rumor, and interrogated every suspect we could find. The trail has led us to abandoned warehouses, remote cabins, and underground lairs where rogue shifters gather. Each dead end has been another blow to our hope, another day stolen from our daughter's childhood. The worst part is not knowing why she was taken. Without understanding the kidnapper's motives, we can't predict their next move or anticipate how to get her back. Are they planning to use her healing abilities for their own purposes? Do they want to study her unique hybrid nature? Or is this simply the cruelest form of psychological warfare, designed to break the most powerful alpha pair on the continent? I press my hand against the window, watching our pack members go about their morning routines in the courtyard below. Even from this distance, I can see the tension in their movements, the way their eyes constantly scan the horizon for threats. Mabel's kidnapping hasn't just devastated Caspian and me. It's shaken the confidence of everyone who calls Raven's Ridge home. We have a lead, Caspian says quietly behind me, his voice carefully controlled. Owen's been monitoring communications from the Northern Territories. There's been unusual activity around the Blackwater Valley. I turn to face him, searching his expression for any sign of real hope. What kind of activity? Pack movements that don't match any known territorial agreements. Strangers asking questions about healing abilities. And he hesitates, as if weighing whether to share what comes next. A report of someone matching your description being seen near the old mining settlements. My heart skips. Someone matching my description? A woman with dark hair and unusual abilities with animals. The witness was human, so the details are unreliable, but it's the first solid lead we've had in over a week. I'm already moving toward the closet, pulling out clothes suitable for a long journey through dangerous territory. How soon can we leave? Sophie. Caspian's voice carries the authority of an alpha, but underneath it, I hear the fear of a father. This could be a trap. If someone is using your appearance to lure us out of protected territory, then we'll be ready for them. I turn to face him, letting him see the determination that's been building inside me for 12 days. I won't sit here and wait while our daughter suffers. If there's even a chance this lead will bring us closer to her, I'm taking it. The mate bond flares between us as Caspian feels my resolve. He knows better than to try to dissuade me when I've made up my mind. Just as I know he'd follow me into hell itself if it meant bringing Mabel home. Then we go together. He says simply, Owen can coordinate things here while we investigate the northern territories. But we do this smart, Sophie. No charging in without backup or plan. I nod. Though we both know that if I catch even a glimpse of our daughter, no amount of planning will keep me from running toward her. The past 12 days have taught me that there are some bonds stronger than logic, stronger than fear, stronger even than the mate connection that ties Caspian and me together. The bond between a mother and her stolen child is forged in fire and tempered in desperation, and I'll let it burn down the world if that's what it takes to bring Mabel home. Outside our window, the morning sun climbs higher over the mountains, promising another day of searching, another day of hope, warring with despair. In a few hours, we'll head north toward the Blackwater Valley, and whatever answers wait for us there. But first, I need to prepare for the possibility that those answers might be more terrible than the questions that have been haunting us. Because somewhere in my heart, I know that whoever took our daughter didn't choose her randomly. They knew exactly what they were stealing, and they had reasons that go far deeper than simple kidnapping. Chapter 2. Endless Search. The war room at Raven's Ridge had been transformed into a command center that would have impressed military strategists. Maps covered every surface, marked with red pins indicating search zones, blue pins for confirmed sightings, and black pins for dead ends. The air hummed with tension and the constant chatter of radio communications as pack members reported in from across 3 states. I stood at the center of it all, coordinating search teams with the methodical precision that had once made me an effective veterinary student. But instead of studying animal anatomy, I was now mapping predator territories and analyzing scent patterns that might lead us to our stolen daughter. Team 7 report. Owen's voice crackled through the communications array. He'd taken over coordination duties while Caspian and I prepared for our northern expedition, his normally warm demeanor replaced by professional efficiency. Nothing in Sector 12, came the reply from Marcus, one of our most experienced trackers. Scent trails go cold at the river crossing, same as yesterday. I marked another dead end on the map, my hand trembling slightly as I added the black pin. 12 days of systematic searching had yielded nothing but frustration and false hope. Every lead that seemed promising turned into another empty cabin, another abandoned campsite, another night of Mabel sleeping somewhere beyond our reach. We need to expand the search radius, I said, studying the ever-growing circle of investigated territory. If they moved her by vehicle after taking her from the compound, she could be hundreds of miles away by now. Caspian looked up from his discussion with the pack's senior warriors, his expression grim. That's exactly what they want us to think. Spread our forces too thin, chase shadows across the entire continent while they consolidate their position. Then what do you suggest? The words came out sharper than I intended, but patience had become a luxury I couldn't afford. We sit here and hope they bring her back out of the goodness of their hearts? The room fell silent. Every pack member present could feel the tension radiating between their alpha pair, the stress fractures appearing in what had always been an unshakable partnership. Through our mate bond, I felt Caspian's immediate regret at having to be the voice of strategic caution when every instinct screamed to tear the world apart looking for our child. I'm sorry, I said quietly, forcing my voice back to something resembling calm. I know you want her back as much as I do. I I can't stand the thought of her being afraid and not understanding why we haven't come for her yet. Luna approached from her monitoring station, still moving carefully due to the injuries she'd sustained during the attack. The guilt in her eyes was almost painful to witness. Sophie, the communication intercepts are showing increased chatter from the Northern Territories. 3 separate pack leaders have mentioned unusual activity around Blackwater Valley in the past 48 hours. I moved to her station, studying the reports that had been filtering in from our network of allies and informants. The Northern Territories had always been more loosely organized than our Western coalition, with smaller packs often operating independently of any central authority. It made them harder to monitor, but it also made them attractive to anyone wanting to hide something important. What kind of unusual activity? Caspian joined us, his authority immediately commanding attention from everyone in the room. Strangers asking questions about healing abilities. Luna read from her notes. Someone claiming to be researching supernatural medical phenomena for a university study. And this is interesting. A woman matching Sophie's description was reportedly seen near the old mining settlements 2 days ago. My heart stopped. Someone matching my description. How closely? Dark hair, similar build, unusual connection with animals. Luna continued. The witness was a human park ranger who claims he saw this woman cure an injured deer just by touching it. When he approached to ask questions, she disappeared into the forest. It could be coincidence, Owen said carefully, or it could be someone deliberately trying to create a trail leading us north. Either way, it's our best lead in over a week, I replied, already mentally calculating travel times and resource allocation. If there's even a chance someone with abilities similar to mine is in that area, we have to investigate. Caspian studied the reports for several more minutes, his strategic mind weighing risks against potential rewards. The Blackwater territory is controlled by Alpha Ezra Fenwick. His pack has been isolationist for years, barely participating in regional councils. If someone wanted to hide in the Northern Territories, his land would be the logical choice. Do you know this Fenwick? I asked, trying to keep the desperation out of my voice. We've met at formal gatherings, but he's never been interested in building alliances. Keeps to himself, runs his territory like a private kingdom. Caspian's expression darkened. There have been rumors about his methods, nothing concrete enough to justify intervention, but enough to make other alphas uncomfortable. The description sent ice through my veins. If Mabel was being held by someone with questionable ethics and no accountability to the larger shifter community, her situation could be even more precarious than we'd feared. What kind of rumors? I pressed. Harsh treatment of pack members who question his authority, willingness to use violence to solve territorial disputes, and... Caspian hesitated. Stories about him being involved with supernatural entities that most packs avoid. Owen looked up from his communications array. That actually aligns with some of the intercepts we've been receiving. There have been mentions of old agreements and ancient debts in connection with the Northern Territories. And something else. References to mediators and supernatural consultants who've been approaching various pack leaders with offers of assistance for complex mystical problems. Ancient debts. The phrase triggered something in my memory. A conversation I'd had months ago with one of the pack's historians about bloodline obligations and supernatural contracts. Could someone have claimed Mabel because of some kind of inherited obligation? It's possible, Caspian admitted reluctantly. There are old stories about debts that pass from parent to child, magical contracts that bind entire bloodlines. But most of those are considered legends. Most legends have some basis in reality, I pointed out, especially in our world. Dr. Martinez chose that moment to enter the war room, her medical bag in hand, and concern written across her features. Sophie, when was the last time you ate something? Or slept for more than 2 hours at a time? I'm fine, I said automatically, though even I could hear the exhaustion in my voice. No, you're not. Dr. Martinez moved to my side, placing her hand on my forehead to check for fever. You've been running on adrenaline and determination for almost 2 weeks. Your body is starting to show signs of serious stress. Through our bond, I felt Caspian's immediate alarm as he registered what Dr. Martinez was observing. Sophie, you can't help Mabel if you collapse from exhaustion. I can't help her by taking naps either, I snapped, then immediately regretted the outburst. I'm sorry. I know you're all trying to help. But every minute we spend here is another minute she's out there without us. Dr. Martinez's expression softened with understanding. I know the urgency you feel is overwhelming. But consider this. If and when we do locate Mabel, you're going to need every ounce of strength you possess. Whatever situation we find her in, she'll need her mother to be at full capacity. The logic was undeniable, but accepting it felt like betrayal. How could I rest when my 3-month-old daughter was somewhere in the world, possibly afraid, possibly hurt, definitely wondering why her parents hadn't come for her yet? The Northern Expedition team is ready, Owen announced. 12 of our best trackers, full communication equipment, and backup protocols in place. We can leave within the hour. Good. I moved toward the door, ready to gather my gear and hit the road. The sooner we reach Blackwater Valley, the sooner we'll know if this lead has substance. Sophie, wait. Caspian's voice carried just enough alpha authority to stop me in my tracks. We need to discuss strategy before we leave. If Ezra Fenwick is involved in this, approaching his territory could be considered an act of aggression. I turned back to face him, feeling the weight of everyone's attention. Are you suggesting we ask permission to search for our stolen daughter? I'm suggesting we be smart about how we conduct that search, Caspian replied evenly. Charging into another Alpha's territory without proper protocols could start a war. And if Mabel is being held there, a war is the last thing we want. The reasonable part of my mind knew he was right. Alpha territorial protocols existed for good reasons, and violating them could have consequences that went far beyond our immediate situation. But the mother in me wanted to tear through anyone and anything that stood between me and my child. Then what do you propose? I asked. We request a formal meeting with Fenwick under the pretense of discussing regional security concerns. We present the evidence we've gathered and ask for his cooperation in the search. If he's innocent, he'll help us. If he's involved, Caspian's eyes hardened. Then we'll know exactly who we're dealing with. Owen nodded approvingly. That approach gives us legal justification for being in his territory, while maintaining the element of surprise if we need to take direct action. How long will arranging this meeting take? I asked, though I dreaded the answer. Standard protocol requires 72 hours notice for formal Alpha conferences, Caspian replied. 3 more days? The number hit me like a physical blow. Caspian, she's a 3-month-old baby. Every day we delay could be... I couldn't finish the sentence. Couldn't voice the fears that had been growing stronger with each passing hour. In the supernatural world, children with unique abilities were often seen as resources to be exploited, rather than innocents to be protected. I know, Caspian said softly, moving to my side and pulling me into his arms. Believe me, every instinct I have is screaming to forget protocols and tear apart anyone who might have touched our daughter. But if we do this wrong, we could lose our only chance to bring her home safely. Through our bond, I felt his internal struggle, the conflict between his role as a responsible leader and his desperate need to protect his family. The mate connection that usually brought us comfort now carried a doubled burden of anguish. There might be another option, Dr. Martinez said quietly. The medical emergency clause. Both Caspian and I turned to her immediately. What emergency clause? Shifter law allows for immediate territorial access if there's a documented medical emergency involving a child under 1 year of age, she explained. Given Mabel's unique hybrid nature and the potential health risks of prolonged separation from her healer mother, I could make a case that this qualifies. Hope flared in my chest for the first time in days. You could do that? I'll need to file the paperwork and get approval from the regional medical board. But yes, it would give us legal justification to enter Fenwick's territory immediately, while maintaining diplomatic protection. Do it, I said before Caspian could voice any objections. Whatever documentation you need, whatever medical justification is required, make it happen. Dr. Martinez nodded and headed for her communication equipment. Within minutes, she was deep in conversation with medical authorities, building a case that would allow us to bypass standard territorial protocols. Caspian watched her work, then turned back to me. Even if this works, we need to be prepared for the possibility that this lead will be another dead end. Or worse, that it's a trap designed to lure us away from Raven's Ridge. I know, I replied, though the thought of another disappointment felt almost unbearable. but we can't let fear of traps keep us from following the only real lead we've had. Then we go prepared for anything, Caspian decided. Full tactical team, emergency evacuation protocols, and backup communications with the compound. If this is a trap, we'll be ready for it. As our people began finalizing preparations for the northern expedition, I found myself staring at the map again, my eyes drawn to the area marked as Blackwater Valley. Somewhere in that rugged, sparsely populated territory, answers were waiting. Whether those answers would bring us closer to Mabel or reveal new threats, I couldn't know. But after 12 days of helpless searching, even dangerous answers felt like progress. The afternoon sun was already beginning its descent toward the western peaks when Dr. Martinez announced that our medical emergency authorization had been approved. We would depart for the northern territories at dawn, armed with legal justification and desperate hope in equal measure. One way or another, the next 24 hours would change everything. Chapter 3: Phantom Trails. The Blackwater Valley stretched before us like a wound carved into the earth, its jagged ridges and dense forests creating perfect hiding places for anyone who wanted to disappear. Our convoy of 3 vehicles wound through narrow mountain roads that hadn't seen maintenance in decades, each pothole and sharp turn a reminder of how far we'd traveled from civilization. I sat in the passenger seat of the lead SUV, my hands pressed against the window as I searched for any sign of supernatural activity. Through the mate bond, I could feel Caspian's constant alertness as he drove, his enhanced senses cataloging every scent and sound that might indicate danger ahead. 2 miles to the territorial boundary, Owen's voice crackled through our communication system from the second vehicle. No signs of border patrols yet. That was unusual. Most Alpha territories maintained visible security presence at their borders, both as a deterrent and as a courtesy warning to visiting shifters. Ezra Fenwick's apparent lack of obvious defenses could mean confidence in his security measures, or it could mean he had something to hide. The moment we crossed into Fenwick's territory, I felt it. A shift in the spiritual atmosphere that made my healer senses recoil. The air itself seemed charged with desperation and barely controlled panic. Emotions so intense they left an almost physical residue on the landscape. "Something's wrong here," I said, pressing my hand to my chest as waves of anxiety washed over me. "The entire territory feels like it's in crisis." Caspian immediately began scanning the tree line for threats. "Wrong how?" "Fear. But not the kind that comes from immediate danger. This is deeper, like someone has been living in terror for weeks." I closed my eyes, trying to filter through the emotional chaos to find anything that might lead us to Mabel. And there's something else. Urgency. Someone here is running out of time. Our convoy pulled off the main road near a cluster of abandoned hunting cabins, their windows dark and boards rotting from years of neglect. Owen's team immediately began setting up a temporary command post, while our supernatural trackers prepared to deploy their enhanced abilities. "Got something," announced Marcus, our best scent tracker, as he emerged from the forest carrying a small piece of fabric. This was caught on a thorn bush about half a mile north. Fresh enough to have been placed within the last few days. I took the fabric from his hands, and the moment my fingers touched it, visions exploded behind my eyes. Flashes of movement through dark trees, the sound of a baby crying, glimpses of rough stone walls illuminated by flickering torchlight. "Mabel," I gasped, swaying as the images faded. "She's been here, recent enough that I can still feel the echo of her presence." "What did you see?" Caspian asked, steadying me with his hands on my shoulders. "Stone buildings. Underground, I think. And she's not alone. There are other people there, but I couldn't see their faces clearly." I studied the fabric more closely, noting its quality and weave. "This isn't from her clothes. Someone else lost this." Owen approached with his tactical team, their expressions grim. "We found evidence of regular patrols through this area. At least 8 different individuals, all moving with military precision. And something else. Trap markers." "What kind of traps?" Caspian's voice carried the dangerous edge that appeared whenever threats to his family were involved. "Pitfalls covered with branches. Tripwires connected to alarms. Someone has turned this entire section of forest into a maze designed to capture or delay anyone following specific trails." The implications were chilling. We weren't just tracking kidnappers. We were walking into a carefully prepared battleground where every advantage belonged to our opponents. They know we're coming, I said, the certainty settling in my stomach like ice. All of this preparation, the traps, the misdirection, they've been planning for us to follow this trail. All of this preparation, the traps, the misdirection, they've been planning for us to follow this trail. And Owen's intelligence about those mystical mediators suggests this isn't just Fenwick acting alone. Someone's been coordinating multiple desperate situations across the territories. Then we give them what they expect, Caspian decided, but not the way they're expecting it. Before he could elaborate, the sound of approaching engines echoed through the valley. 3 black SUVs emerged from the forest, moving at high speed directly toward our position. They stopped just beyond effective weapons range, their tinted windows preventing us from seeing the occupants. "Fenwick?" Owen asked, raising his rifle to a ready position. "Has to be," Caspian replied. "The question is whether he's here to help or eliminate us." The answer came when the lead vehicle's door opened and a man emerged who could only be Alpha Ezra Fenwick. Tall and powerfully built, he moved with the controlled aggression of someone who had been pushed beyond his limits. His dark hair was disheveled, his clothes showed signs of days spent in the wilderness, and his eyes held a wildness that spoke of desperation approaching the breaking point. "You need to leave," he called across the clearing, his voice carrying the authority of an alpha accustomed to being obeyed without question. "This territory is under emergency protocols. We have legal authorization to be here," Caspian replied, stepping forward to meet the challenge. "Medical emergency provisions regarding a kidnapped child. I don't care what authorization you think you have," Fenwick snarled, his control beginning to fray. "You have no idea what you're interfering with." I moved to Caspian's side, letting Fenwick see the desperation in my own eyes. "Someone took my daughter. If you know anything about missing children in this territory, please help us." For a moment, Fenwick's aggressive posture faltered. I saw recognition flicker across his features, the acknowledgement of shared anguish that only another parent could understand. But then his walls slammed back into place, harder than before. "I can't help you," he said. But the words came out strained, as if they were being forced from him against his will. "And you can't help me. Some situations are beyond outside intervention. Try us," Caspian challenged. "We've dealt with supernatural threats before." "Not like this," Fenwick replied with bitter certainty. "You think you understand the darkness that exists in our world, but you've only seen the surface. There are powers that make your mate bond look like a child's game, obligations that transcend pack loyalty or family love." The way he spoke sent chills down my spine. This wasn't just another territorial alpha protecting his domain. This was someone trapped in circumstances beyond his control, someone who had been backed into a corner with no acceptable options. "What obligations?" I asked. "What power has such a hold over you that you can't even accept help finding missing children?" Fenwick's laugh was harsh and empty. "You wouldn't understand. You've built your life on the assumption that good intentions and healing powers can solve any problem. Some debts can't be healed away, Sophie Cross." The use of my name made it clear that he knew exactly who we were and why we were here. This wasn't a chance encounter. It was a confrontation he had been expecting, possibly even engineering. "Then explain it to us," Caspian said. "Give us a reason to understand why you're standing between us and our daughter." "Because some choices destroy everyone who touches them," Fenwick replied, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper. "Because sometimes the only way to save one life is to sacrifice another, and the people making those choices don't get the luxury of clean consciences." Owen had been slowly positioning our people during the conversation, preparing for the possibility that negotiations would break down into violence. But I could see that Fenwick's team was doing the same thing, their movements suggesting professional military training rather than typical pack tactics. "Who is making you do this?" I asked directly. "Who has enough power over an alpha to force him into whatever situation you're describing?" Fenwick stared at me for a long moment, and I saw something break behind his eyes. For just an instant, the mask of aggressive authority slipped, revealing the face of a man who was drowning in circumstances beyond his control. "You really don't understand," he said finally. "This isn't about power over me. This is about choices I made years ago that are finally demanding payment. This is about consequences that don't care about fairness or justice or the safety of innocent children. What consequences? Caspian pressed. The kind that follow you across lifetimes, Fenwick replied. The kind that compound with interest until the debt becomes impossible to ignore. Before either of us could respond, alarms began sounding from our communication equipment. Marcus's voice crackled through the radio with urgent intensity. Movement on all flanks. At least 20 hostiles approaching through the forest, using supernatural concealment techniques. Ezra, I said, sudden understanding flooding through me. You didn't come here to stop us. You came here to warn us. His expression confirmed my suspicion. I came here to give you one last chance to leave with your lives. After this moment, I won't be able to protect you from what's coming. And if we refuse to leave without our daughter? Caspian asked. Fenwick's shoulders sagged with the weight of inevitable tragedy. Then you'll discover that some rescue attempts only succeed in adding more victims to the count. The sound of approaching footsteps through the underbrush was growing louder, accompanied by the distinctive whistle of supernatural energy being channeled into weapons and binding spells. Whatever force had been pulling Fenwick's strings was tired of subtle manipulation and ready for direct confrontation. Last chance, Fenwick said, backing toward his vehicles. Walk away now, and maybe you'll live long enough to find another way to save her. We're not leaving without Mabel, I said with absolute finality. Fenwick nodded as if he had expected that answer. Then may whatever gods you believe in have mercy on all of us. Because what happens next is going to require more than healing powers to set right. He climbed back into his SUV and drove away, leaving us to face whatever trap had been closing around us since the moment we entered his territory. But as his vehicles disappeared into the forest, I couldn't shake the feeling that this confrontation had revealed more questions than answers. Whatever force was controlling the situation in Blackwater Valley, it was powerful enough to turn an alpha into little more than a reluctant messenger, and that meant the real enemy was still waiting for us in the shadows. Chapter 4. Secrets and Broken Alliances. The trap closed around us with devastating efficiency. Within minutes of Fenwick's departure, the forest erupted with coordinated attacks from enemies who moved like ghosts through the underbrush. Our defensive position near the abandoned hunting cabins became a liability, as supernatural forces struck from multiple directions simultaneously. Contact left! Owen's voice cut through the chaos as silver-tipped projectiles whistled past our heads. They're using military-grade equipment with supernatural enhancements. I crouched behind one of the SUVs, my healing senses overwhelmed by the waves of pain and fear radiating from the battlefield. These weren't random attackers. They moved with the precision of professionals who had been studying our tactics and preparing countermeasures for weeks. Sophie, stay down. Caspian's alpha voice carried absolute authority as he shifted into his massive wolf form, his black fur seeming to absorb light as he bounded toward the nearest group of attackers. But even as I watched him engage the enemy, part of my attention remained focused on the spiritual disturbance I'd been tracking since we entered the valley. Mabel's presence felt closer than ever, her distress spiking with each explosion and gunshot that echoed through the mountains. She can hear the fighting, I said to Owen, who had taken cover beside me. The noise is terrifying her. Then we end this quickly, he replied grimly, signaling to our tactical team to advance on the eastern flank. The battle raged for 20 minutes that felt like hours. Our attackers used weapons I'd never seen before, devices that fired nets charged with electrical energy, projectiles that released clouds of sedative gas, and something that looked like technological crossbows, but fired bolts of pure force rather than physical ammunition. When the shooting finally stopped, 3 of our team members were down with serious injuries, and we had captured exactly no one. Our enemies had retreated as systematically as they had attacked, leaving behind only spent casings and the lingering scent of supernatural power. Professional extraction, Marcus reported as he examined the abandoned equipment. Someone with serious resources and extensive knowledge of shifter physiology designed these weapons specifically to incapacitate rather than kill. They want us alive, I realized with growing unease. This whole attack was designed to capture, not eliminate us. Caspian had shifted back to human form, his clothes torn and bloodied from multiple encounters during the fight, which means they have plans for us beyond simple territorial defense. Owen approached with a device he'd recovered from one of the abandoned positions. This is sophisticated surveillance equipment. They've been watching us since we entered the valley, possibly since we left Raven's Ridge. The implications hit me like ice water. How long have they been planning this? How much do they know about our capabilities, our tactics, our weaknesses? Enough to engineer a situation where we'd feel compelled to come here, Caspian replied, his expression dark with understanding. The sightings, the reports of someone matching your description, the evidence trail leading to Blackwater Valley, all of it could have been carefully constructed bait. I stood up from behind our defensive position, surveying the battlefield with new eyes. Then where is she? If this was all designed to lure us here, where is Mabel? Before anyone could answer, my phone buzzed with an incoming text message from an unknown number. The words on the screen made my blood freeze. The child is safe for now. Continue following the trail north. Come alone, or the next message will contain proof that your daughter is no longer breathing. Absolutely not, Caspian said after reading the message over my shoulder. This is obviously a trap designed to separate us from our support team. They already demonstrated they can attack us even with full tactical support, I pointed out, and they made it clear that following their instructions is the only way to keep Mabel alive. Owen studied the message on my phone, his expression troubled. The phrasing is specific. Continue following the trail north. Suggests they know exactly where we are and where they want us to go next, which could mean they've been hurting us from the beginning, Caspian realized. Every decision we've made, every lead we've followed, might have been guided by their manipulation. The thought was sickening. If our enemies had been controlling our investigation from the start, then they knew our capabilities, our psychological weaknesses, and our desperation better than we knew ourselves. We weren't rescuers. We were pieces being moved around a board by players whose game we didn't understand. There has to be another way, I said. Though even as I spoke the words, I knew they weren't true. Some approach that doesn't involve walking directly into whatever they have planned. Marcus appeared at my shoulder, carrying a tablet displaying aerial surveillance images he'd captured using our drone equipment. There is another approach, but you're not going to like it. The images showed a complex of buildings hidden deep in the forest, accessible only by a single mountain road that wound through terrain perfectly suited for ambushes. Heat signatures indicated multiple occupants, but the resolution wasn't clear enough to determine if any of them were children. How far? I asked. 12 miles through some of the roughest terrain in the region, and based on the defensive positions we can identify, anyone approaching that compound will be visible from at least 6 different observation points. Caspian studied the images with the tactical mind that had kept our pack safe through countless threats. It's a perfect killing ground. They'll see us coming from miles away and have time to prepare whatever reception they've planned. Then we don't give them time to prepare, I said, an idea forming despite the obvious risks. We split up. Part of our team creates a distraction from the main approach, while a smaller group infiltrates from an unexpected direction. Sophie, no. Caspian's voice carried the finality of an alpha's command. I'm not letting you walk into that compound without backup. And I'm not letting our daughter spend another night in the hands of people who use her as leverage, I replied with equal determination. We've spent 2 weeks playing by their rules, following their leads, dancing to their manipulations. It's time to take control of this situation. Owen cleared his throat diplomatically. There might be a compromise position. We create multiple diversions while maintaining communication protocols that allow for immediate extraction if things go wrong. Before we could continue the debate, another message appeared on my phone, this one containing a video file that made my heart stop. It showed Mabel lying on what appeared to be a medical examination table, electrodes attached to her tiny chest, while machines monitored her vital signs. She wasn't crying, but her eyes were wide with confusion and fear that no 3-month-old child should ever have to experience. 12 hours, read the accompanying text. After that, we begin testing the limits of hybrid physiology. I handed the phone to Caspian and watched his expression cycle through rage, despair, and cold determination. Through our mate bond, I felt his alpha instincts warring with his protective father emotions, each impulse demanding different courses of action. We go now, he said finally. Full assault, multiple approach vectors, and we accept whatever risks are necessary to end this. Agreed, I replied, though part of my mind was already calculating how to position myself for the best chance of reaching Mabel quickly once the fighting started. Marcus began coordinating our attack plans, while Owen organized our remaining equipment and ammunition. Dr. Martinez worked frantically to treat the injuries our people had sustained during the earlier battle, her face grim, as she realized some of our team members were in no condition to participate in a complex tactical operation. We're going in undermanned and under-equipped against an enemy that's been preparing for this confrontation for weeks. Owen summarized as we finalized our approach strategy. The odds are not in our favor. The odds haven't been in our favor since the night Mabel was taken, I replied. But we're still here, and we're still fighting. As our team prepared to move out, I found myself thinking about the video we'd received. Something about the setting had seemed familiar, though I couldn't identify what had triggered that recognition. The walls, the equipment, the lighting, it all suggested a medical facility, but not one designed for healing. The compound, I said suddenly, grabbing Caspian's arm. In the video, Mabel was in a medical facility, but the buildings in our surveillance images looked like residential or administrative structures. Underground, Caspian realized immediately. They're keeping her in a hidden facility beneath the visible compound, which means our approach strategy needs to account for subterranean levels and possible escape tunnels, Owen added, already revising our tactical plans. The complexity of our mission had just increased exponentially, but so had our understanding of what we were facing. Our enemies weren't just kidnappers. They were researchers with access to medical equipment and the resources to construct hidden facilities in remote locations. What kind of research requires a 3-month-old hybrid? I asked, though I dreaded the answer. The kind that's been theorized for decades but never attempted, Marcus replied grimly. Genetic analysis, power replication, bloodline synthesis, all the things the human organizations have been trying to achieve since they first learned about our existence. But these aren't humans, Caspian pointed out. The coordination, the supernatural weapons, the knowledge of our capabilities, this has to be other shifters. Shifters working with humans, I corrected. Pieces of the puzzle finally falling into place. The worst of both worlds. Supernatural abilities combined with human technology and resources. As we loaded our gear and prepared to assault the compound, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were walking into something far more complex than a simple rescue mission. The forces arrayed against us had resources, knowledge, and motivations that went beyond anything we'd encountered before, but none of that mattered compared to the image of my daughter's frightened eyes in that video. Whatever research they were planning, whatever experiments they wanted to conduct, whatever larger conspiracy we'd stumbled into, it all became secondary to the fundamental need to bring Mabel home safely. The sun was setting behind the mountain peaks as our convoy began moving toward the compound, each of us knowing that the next few hours would determine whether we emerged as a family reunited or became additional victims of forces we were only beginning to understand. But as I watched the forest close around us, I felt something I hadn't experienced since the night of the kidnapping. Hope. Not the desperate, grasping hope of the past 2 weeks, but the solid certainty that comes from taking action instead of merely reacting. We were no longer following their script. Finally, we were writing our own. Chapter 5. The Confrontation. The compound materialized out of the darkness like something from a nightmare, its buildings arranged in a defensive pattern that spoke of military planning and paranoid preparation. Floodlights swept the perimeter in regular intervals, while guard towers offered commanding views of all approach routes through the valley. I lay prone beside Caspian on a ridge overlooking the facility, studying the target through high-powered binoculars, while Owen coordinated our assault teams via encrypted radio. The past 6 hours had been spent positioning our people for a coordinated attack that would give us the best chance of reaching Mabel before our enemies could relocate her. Heat signatures confirm at least 30 occupants, Marcus reported from his observation post on the eastern flank. Most concentrated in the main building, but there's definitely activity in the underground levels. Any sign of children? I asked, though I already knew the surveillance equipment couldn't penetrate deep enough to give us that information. Negative on visual confirmation, but the power consumption patterns suggest significant medical equipment operating below ground level. The words sent ice through my veins. Medical equipment meant they were already conducting whatever research had motivated Mabel's kidnapping. Every minute we spent in preparation was another minute my daughter spent as a test subject for people who saw her as a specimen rather than a child. Owen's team is in position on the north approach, Caspian reported, listening to updates through his earpiece. Dr. Martinez is standing by with the mobile medical unit in case we need emergency treatment for Mabel or anyone else we might find down there. I checked my equipment one final time. Weapons, communication gear, first aid supplies, and the portable scanner that would help us locate Mabel's unique energy signature once we breached the facility. Everything we needed to bring our daughter home, assuming we survived the next hour. Remember, Caspian said quietly, his hand briefly covering mine, our primary objective is Mabel's safety. Everything else is secondary. Understood, I replied, though we both knew that once the fighting started, our carefully planned objectives might become meaningless. But Caspian, if something happens to me, if I don't make it out, promise me you'll still find her. Nothing is going to happen to you, he said with the absolute certainty that only an alpha could project. We go in together, we find her together, and we come home together. Through our mate bond, I felt his determination reinforcing my own courage. Whatever waited for us in that compound, we would face it as partners, drawing strength from the connection that had survived every challenge our enemies had thrown at us. All teams report ready. Owen's voice crackled through our communications. Assault commences in 60 seconds. I took a deep breath, centering myself for what was about to come. Through my healer senses, I could feel Mabel's presence somewhere beneath the buildings below. Alive, frightened, but unmistakably our daughter. That connection would guide me through whatever maze they had constructed to keep her hidden. 30 seconds, Owen announced. Caspian shifted into his wolf form beside me, his massive black shape nearly invisible against the darkness. Our other team members made similar transformations, becoming the predators that centuries of evolution had designed them to be. 10 seconds. I closed my eyes and extended my supernatural senses as far as they would reach, mapping the emotional landscape of the compound below. Fear, anticipation, cold scientific curiosity, and underneath it all, a current of desperate urgency that reminded me uncomfortably of Ezra Fenwick's behavior earlier. Go! The assault began with systematic precision. Owen's team struck the main gate with explosive charges, while Marcus led an infiltration through the eastern perimeter. Our enemies responded immediately, flooding the compound with armed defenders who moved with military efficiency. But they had made one critical error in their preparations. They had planned for a conventional shifter assault, not for attackers guided by supernatural tracking abilities. While their attention focused on the obvious approach routes, Caspian and I used my connection to Mabel to navigate directly toward the hidden underground facility. The entrance was concealed beneath what appeared to be a maintenance shed, accessible through a steel door that required both electronic keycards and biometric identification. Caspian's enhanced strength solved the access problem by tearing the door completely off its hinges. Motion sensors and alarm systems throughout the corridor ahead, I reported, my healer senses detecting the electronic signatures of the security network. But I can feel her. She's maybe 50 yards deeper into the complex. We moved through sterile corridors that reminded me uncomfortably of the facility where Victor Crane had held me months earlier. The same combination of advanced technology and cold institutional efficiency, designed to strip away humanity and reduce people to research subjects. Contact ahead, Caspian warned, his enhanced hearing detecting movement before my human senses could register it. 3 guards emerged from concealed positions, wielding weapons that crackled with electrical energy. But their tactical training hadn't prepared them for the fury of an alpha protecting his child. Caspian disabled all 3 within seconds, his wolf form moving with lethal grace through their defensive formation. The corridor branched into multiple directions, each leading deeper into the underground complex. But my connection to Mabel pulled me unerringly toward the left passage, past laboratories filled with equipment I didn't recognize, and holding cells that made my stomach turn with their implications. Sophie, Caspian said urgently, shifting back to human form as we approached a reinforced door marked with biohazard symbols. She's in there. I pressed my hand against the door, feeling Mabel's presence so strongly it made me dizzy. She was alive, conscious, and calling for me with the wordless desperation that only a terrified child could project. Stand back, I said, channeling healing energy into destructive force for the second time in my life. The door exploded inward, revealing a medical facility that made Victor Crane's laboratory look primitive by comparison. Monitoring equipment lined the walls, connected to the examination table where my 3-month-old daughter lay restrained by devices designed for someone much larger than a baby. But Mabel wasn't alone in the room. A small girl, perhaps 7 years old, lay on a second examination table, her breathing shallow and her skin pale with illness that radiated supernatural wrongness. Dark veins were visible beneath her skin, pulsing with energy that felt like corruption made manifest. "You're too late," said a voice from the shadows beside the monitoring equipment. Ezra Fenwick stepped into the light, but he looked nothing like the confident alpha we had encountered earlier. His clothes were torn, his face was marked with cuts and bruises, and his eyes held the hollow desperation of someone who had been pushed beyond all endurance. "Fenwick!" Caspian snarled, immediately positioning himself between the other alpha and our daughter. "I should have known you were behind this." "Behind it?" Fenwick laughed bitterly. "You think I chose any of this? You think I wanted to watch my daughter die while I orchestrated the kidnapping of yours? Your daughter?" I looked back at the sick child on the second table, understanding beginning to dawn. "That's Sabine, my 7-year-old daughter who has been dying for 3 weeks because of choices I made years ago," Fenwick confirmed, his voice breaking with anguish. "Choices that are finally demanding payment in blood." I moved toward Mabel's table, my hands already glowing with healing energy as I began disconnecting the monitoring equipment. She was unharmed, but terrified, her tiny fists reaching toward me with desperate need. "Don't," Fenwick said urgently. "If you remove her from the monitoring system before the process is complete, both children will die." "What process?" Caspian demanded. But I was already reading the data from the medical displays. The equipment was measuring energy transfer between the 2 children. Power flowing from Mabel's hybrid healing abilities into Sabine's corrupted system. They were using my daughter as a living battery to keep the other child alive. "How long has this been running?" I asked, horrified by the implications. 72 hours, Fenwick replied, "since the moment we brought her here. It's the only thing that's kept Sabine breathing." "And what happens when Mabel's strength fails?" Caspian's voice carried death in its undertones. Fenwick's silence was answer enough. "You're killing our daughter to save yours," I said, the full scope of his betrayal becoming clear. "You planned this entire operation, manipulated us into coming here, all so you could sacrifice Mabel for Sabine." "Not sacrifice," Fenwick protested desperately. "The original plan was different. We were supposed to find another way, a method that would save both children. But time ran out, and the people I'm working with decided that one hybrid life was acceptable payment for breaking the curse that's killing my daughter." "What curse?" I demanded. "What could possibly justify what you're doing?" Before Fenwick could answer, alarms began blaring throughout the facility. Owen's voice crackled through our communication equipment with urgent warnings about reinforcements arriving at the compound perimeter. "We're out of time," Fenwick said, pulling a device from his pocket that looked like a remote control. "The process needs another 6 hours to complete the power transfer. After that, Sabine will be cured and your daughter will..." "Will what?" Caspian stepped closer to Fenwick, his alpha authority radiating dangerous intent. "Will probably survive," Fenwick finished weakly. "The calculations suggest a 60% chance of recovery if we stop the process at exactly the right moment." 60%? I felt healing energy building within me, but I didn't know how to safely disconnect Mabel from equipment I didn't understand. "You're gambling with our daughter's life based on 60% odds?" "I'm trying to save my daughter with the only option I have left," Fenwick replied, his desperation making him dangerous in ways that had nothing to do with his alpha strength. "You have each other. You have your pack. You have resources and allies. All I have is Sabine, and she's dying because of my failures as a father." But as I looked between my daughter and Sabine, I realized that the solution to this nightmare might not require choosing between them. My healing abilities had grown stronger since Mabel's birth, powered by the desperate love that only a mother could feel. "There might be another way," I said slowly, an idea forming despite the chaos around us. "But it would require you to trust me completely." "Sophie, no," Caspian said immediately, recognizing the dangerous determination in my voice. "Whatever you're thinking, we find another solution. There is no other solution," I replied, moving toward the space between both examination tables. But I might be able to heal them both if you're willing to let me try. Fenwick stared at me with desperate hope warring against protective skepticism. What would you need to do? Channel healing energy into both children simultaneously while using our mate bond to draw additional power from Caspian, I explained, though I wasn't entirely certain the technique would work. It's never been attempted before, but the theory is sound. And if it fails, Fenwick asked, then we lose everyone, I admitted. But if we don't try, we lose them anyway. Chapter 6. A Father's Truth. The silence that followed my proposal stretched like a taut wire ready to snap. Ezra Fenwick stared at me with the desperate hope of a drowning man offered a rope, while Caspian's protective instincts radiated through our mate bond with overwhelming intensity. Sophie, Caspian said carefully, channeling that much energy could kill you. We've never tested the limits of what our bond can safely transfer, and we've never tested what happens when I don't try to save both children, I replied, studying the medical readouts that showed Mabel's energy levels dropping steadily. She's already weakening. Whatever process they've initiated, it's draining her faster than her hybrid nature can compensate. Fenwick moved closer to his daughter's table, his hand hovering over her pale forehead, as if physical contact might somehow transfer his own life force to keep her breathing. The curse has been eating away at her for weeks. Every day she grows weaker. Every night she screams from pain that no medicine can touch. What curse? I demanded, finally asking the question that had been building since we'd discovered his involvement. What could possibly drive you to kidnap an innocent child? Fenwick's composure finally cracked completely. His shoulders sagged as if a tremendous weight had settled on them. And when he spoke, his voice carried the exhaustion of someone who had been carrying unbearable guilt for too long. 3 months ago, I made a territorial agreement with a coven of witches who claimed rights to land that had been in my pack's control for generations. He began, his eyes never leaving his daughter's face. I refused their demands, drove them from the territory with force, and thought that was the end of it. But it wasn't, Caspian said, understanding beginning to dawn in his expression. They came back during the new moon, not to fight, but to deliver payment for what they called my arrogance and disrespect. Fenwick's hands were shaking now, grief and rage warring in his voice. They performed a blood curse on Sabine while she slept, binding her life force to a countdown that would drain her completely within 90 days. I felt sick as the full horror of his situation became clear, and the only way to break a blood curse is to offer equivalent payment in innocent blood, Fenwick finished. They told me exactly what would be required. The life force of another child, one that could sustain the breaking ritual. So you researched hybrid children and targeted our daughter. Caspian's voice carried death in its undertones. I researched every option, Fenwick snapped, his alpha authority flaring despite his desperate circumstances. I spent weeks looking for alternatives, consulting with every mystic and healer I could contact. The answer was always the same. Only the blood of a healer hybrid could provide enough power to break a curse of this magnitude. And you decided our daughter's life was worth less than your daughter's, I said, though I tried to keep judgment out of my voice. As a mother, I understood the terrible arithmetic that desperation could create. I decided that I would do anything necessary to save the only family I have left. Fenwick replied, Sabine's mother died when she was 3. She's all I have in this world. And watching her suffer because of my mistakes has been destroying me piece by piece. We need to make a decision now, I said, studying both children with my enhanced senses. Mabel's energy levels are dropping faster than Sabine can absorb them. If this process continues much longer, we'll lose them both. What exactly are you proposing? Fenwick asked, desperation making him willing to consider options that would have seemed impossible under normal circumstances. I channel healing energy directly into both children while using my mate bond with Caspian to draw additional power, I explained, positioning myself between the 2 examination tables. Instead of letting Mabel's energy drain into Sabine passively, I actively guide the healing process to address both the curse and Mabel's exhaustion simultaneously. That's never been attempted, Fenwick said, though hope was beginning to replace despair in his voice. Because no one has ever had access to a healer hybrid child and an alpha mate bond at the same time, I replied. The combination might provide enough power to break the curse without sacrificing anyone. Caspian moved to stand behind me, his hands settling on my shoulders in preparation for the most dangerous healing ritual either of us had ever attempted. Through our bond, I felt his absolute trust despite his terror at the risks we were about to take. "If this kills you, I'll never forgive myself," he said quietly. "If we don't try, I'll never forgive myself," I replied, beginning to channel energy into my hands. But before I could begin the healing process, Fenwick suddenly stepped back from his daughter's table, his expression stricken with realization. "I can't," he whispered, staring at Mabel with horror. "I can't let you risk your life to fix my mistakes. I can't be responsible for orphaning your daughter, even if it means saving mine." "Ezra," I said gently, using his first name deliberately to cut through his alpha posturing. "This isn't about responsibility or blame anymore. This is about two children who need help, and parents who love them enough to try anything. But if the ritual fails, then we fail together," I interrupted. "But if we don't try, Sabine dies anyway, and Mabel might not survive having her energy drained for much longer." Fenwick looked between his dying daughter and my exhausted child, the weight of impossible choices visible in every line of his face. This was the moment when he had to decide whether his role as a father could overcome his guilt as a kidnapper. "What do you need me to do?" he asked finally. "Hold Sabine's hand and focus on your love for her," I instructed, beginning to build healing energy in my core. The curse feeds on despair and guilt. The more powerfully you can project protective love, the weaker its hold on her will become. I placed one hand on Mabel's chest and reached across to touch Sabine's arm, immediately feeling the wrongness that permeated the older child's system. The curse was like a parasite feeding on her life force, growing stronger even as it consumed what it needed to survive. "Caspian," I said, feeling the first dangerous surge of power building beyond what I could safely contain alone. His hands tightened on my shoulders as our mate bond flared to life, creating a conduit that allowed his alpha strength to flow into my healing abilities. The sensation was overwhelming, like trying to channel lightning through my nervous system while maintaining enough control to direct it precisely where it was needed. Energy flowed from me into both children simultaneously, but the curse fought back with vicious intensity. Dark magic wrapped around my healing power like thorns, trying to corrupt and redirect it into feeding the very force I was trying to destroy. "It's fighting me," I gasped, sweat beading on my forehead as I struggled to maintain control. "The witches designed it to resist healing," Fenwick said, his own energy now flowing toward his daughter through sheer force of paternal will. "They knew someone would eventually try to break the curse and built-in defenses. But they hadn't accounted for the unique combination of energies I could access. Mabel's hybrid nature provided healing power that operated on frequencies the curse couldn't fully block, while Caspian's alpha strength gave me the raw force needed to overwhelm the dark magic's defenses. Slowly, painfully, I began to feel the curse weakening its hold on Sabine's life force. At the same time, Mabel's energy levels stabilized as I channeled power back into her exhausted system. "It's working," Fenwick breathed, watching color return to his daughter's cheeks for the first time in weeks. But the effort was taking everything I had. Through the mate bond, I felt Caspian pouring his strength into me. But even our combined power was barely enough to maintain the delicate balance required to heal both children without killing myself in the process. "Sophie," Caspian warned, feeling my vital signs fluctuating dangerously. "You're pushing too hard." "Almost there," I managed to say through gritted teeth. The curse broke with an almost audible snap, its dark energy dissipating like smoke in the wind. Sabine's breathing immediately deepened, and the unnatural pallor began fading from her skin. At the same time, Mabel opened her eyes and looked directly at me, her tiny hand reaching toward my face with the instinctive recognition that every baby shows for her mother. The moment the curse shattered, agony tore through my body like liquid fire. I collapsed to my knees, blood streaming from my nose as the mate bond flickered dangerously. Through our connection, I felt Caspian's terror as our psychic link wavered and nearly severed completely. My healing abilities, overtaxed beyond their limits, began shutting down as a protective measure. For several horrifying seconds, I couldn't feel Mabel's presence at all, couldn't sense whether she was alive or dead. Only Caspian's desperate grip on my shoulders kept me conscious, as my body paid the price for channeling power that should have killed me. "Thank you," Fenwick said, tears streaming down his face as he gathered his daughter into his arms. "Thank you for giving me the chance to be a father instead of a monster." "We all make mistakes when we're desperate," I replied, accepting Caspian's help to stand. "What matters is how we choose to fix them." But even as I spoke those words, I could feel the true cost of what I had just accomplished. The healing ritual had drained something fundamental from me. My abilities now flickered unreliably like a damaged circuit, and the mate bond with Caspian felt strained and fragile. The victory was real, but it had come at a price that would take months to fully recover from. Chapter 7: Miracles and Redemption. The underground medical facility fell silent after the last echo of battle faded from the levels above us. Through our communication equipment, I could hear Owen coordinating the systematic securing of the compound. But here in this sterile room, peace had finally settled over the four of us and our rescued children. I held Mabel close against my chest, feeling her tiny heartbeat synchronize with mine as the healing energy settled into its new equilibrium. The fighting was over, not through continued violence, but through the choice to heal rather than harm. "The connection is stable," I reported after extending my healer senses to monitor both children. "Mabel's energy levels are returning to normal, and Sabine shows no trace of the curse's influence." "How is this possible?" Fenwick asked, wonder coloring his voice as he watched his daughter's chest rise and fall with easy, natural breathing. 3 weeks ago, the best mystics on the continent told me nothing could break a blood curse once it had taken hold. They were probably right under normal circumstances, I replied, studying the subtle energy patterns that now linked the two children. But they didn't account for hybrid healing abilities channeled through an alpha-mate bond. The combination created power frequencies that the curse couldn't adapt to fast enough. Caspian moved to my side, his hand settling gently on Mabel's head as he studied our daughter with the relief of a parent who had feared the worst and been granted a miracle. "Are there any long-term effects we should be concerned about?" "The opposite, actually," I said, sensing the positive changes that had resulted from the healing process. "Both children are stronger now than they were before any of this started. The shared energy exchange created permanent improvements in their immune systems and natural healing capabilities." Sabine stirred in her father's arms, her eyes opening with the clarity of someone waking from natural sleep rather than magical unconsciousness. She looked around the medical facility with the curiosity typical of a bright 7-year-old, showing no fear despite the strange surroundings. "Daddy," she said, her voice strong and clear for the first time in weeks. "I feel better. The hurt is gone." "Yes, sweetheart," Fenwick replied, his voice thick with emotion. "The hurt is all gone. This lady and her baby helped make you well again." As we prepared to leave the facility, Caspian's expression grew troubled as he studied the sophisticated equipment around us. "Ezra, who funded all of this? The medical equipment, the underground construction, the coordination required to pull off something this complex?" Fenwick's confusion appeared genuine as he looked around the laboratory with new attention. I thought it was resources from my own territory. When the intermediaries approached me about the facility, they said it had been prepared using PAC funds." "What intermediaries?" I asked, a chill running down my spine. "Representatives from the mystical community. They claimed to have connections with healers who could help break the curse if I provided them with the necessary components." Fenwick's voice faltered as understanding began to dawn. "They said they were working independently, that the facility was temporary." Caspian and I exchanged meaningful looks. The level of sophistication we'd encountered suggested resources far beyond what a single pack could marshal, and the coordination required indicated planning that had begun long before Sabine was cursed. "Describe these representatives," Caspian requested, his alpha authority making it clear this wasn't a casual question. 2 individuals. They claimed to be supernatural mediators, people who helped resolve conflicts between different mystical communities. Fenwick shifted Sabine's weight, his expression growing increasingly concerned. "They knew about the curse before I told anyone, knew exactly what would be required to break it. They knew because they were connected to the witches who cast it. I realized, the pieces falling into place. Ezra, you were manipulated from the beginning. The curse, the intermediaries, this facility, it was all orchestrated to get access to Mabel. The color drained from Fenwick's face. Are you saying I was a pawn? That Sabine was cursed specifically to force me into kidnapping your daughter? It's the only explanation that makes sense, Caspian said grimly. Someone wanted Mabel badly enough to engineer an entire conspiracy around obtaining her. But why? Fenwick asked desperately. What could they want with a 3-month-old child that would justify such elaborate planning? I looked down at Mabel, seeing her with new understanding. Her hybrid nature wasn't just rare, it was potentially revolutionary. If someone could study her unique combination of healing abilities and alpha bloodlines, they might be able to replicate those gifts artificially. They want to create more children like her, I said quietly, or figure out how to transfer her abilities to others. The implications were staggering. If hostile forces could manufacture hybrid healing abilities, they could upset the balance of power that had kept the supernatural world stable for centuries. The facility is too sophisticated for this to be their only operation, Caspian observed, studying the equipment with new suspicion. This represents years of planning and significant financial investment, which means they're not done, I concluded. Whatever larger plan we've stumbled into, saving Mabel was just the beginning. Fenwick looked stricken as the full scope of his manipulation became clear. I've been helping them without realizing it. Every decision I made, every action I took to save Sabine, I was following their script. Because you're a father who was willing to do anything to save his child, I said gently. They exploited your love for Sabine, just like they're probably exploiting other desperate parents right now. The sound of approaching footsteps drew our attention as Owen arrived with our extraction team. His relief at finding us safe quickly shifted to professional concern as he took in the sophisticated facility around us. This is bigger than a simple kidnapping operation, he observed immediately. Someone invested serious resources in this setup. Agreed, Caspian replied. We need to document everything before we leave, and we need to start thinking about this as part of a larger conspiracy, rather than an isolated incident. As our people began securing evidence and preparing for departure, I found myself studying Fenwick's face. The man who had terrorized us for weeks was clearly as much a victim as we were, manipulated by forces that had used his desperation against him. Ezra, I said quietly, when we get back to Raven's Ridge, you're going to help us identify these intermediaries. Every detail you can remember about how they approached you, what they promised, how they guided your decisions. Of course, he replied immediately. Anything that might help prevent them from doing this to other families. Sabine chose that moment to reach toward Mabel, her small hand touching my daughter's tiny fingers. The connection between them flared with warmth, and both children seemed to relax at the contact. They'll always be linked now, I realized. Whatever happens with the larger conspiracy, Sabine and Mabel will be able to sense if the other is in danger. Is that enough protection? Fenwick asked, his parental instincts fully activated now that he understood the true scope of the threats his daughter faced. It's a start, Caspian replied. But we're going to need to completely restructure our security protocols. If this conspiracy is as extensive as it appears, they'll try again. As we prepared to leave the facility that had been both prison and salvation, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were walking away from answers as much as we were escaping danger. Whoever had orchestrated Sabine's curse and Mabel's kidnapping was still out there, still planning, still working toward goals we didn't fully understand. But we had our daughters back, and we had learned that even the most desperate situations could be resolved without sacrificing our principles. That knowledge would have to sustain us through whatever challenges lay ahead. Sophie, Fenwick said as we reached the facility's exit, I want you to know that regardless of what the council decides about my punishment, I'll spend the rest of my life making sure Sabine never becomes a target again. And will help you, I replied, meaning it completely. Whatever conspiracy we've uncovered, we face it together, all of us. The mountain air felt clean and cold as we emerged from the underground complex, carrying our children toward the extraction point where helicopters waited to take us home. Behind us, the facility would soon be dismantled by our people, its secrets documented and its equipment studied for clues about our unknown enemies. But ahead of us lay Raven's Ridge, safety, and the beginning of a new chapter in which we would have to learn how to protect not just our own family, but all the families that might be targeted by forces willing to exploit parental love for their own dark purposes. The rescue was complete, but the real work was just beginning. Chapter 8. Forever Bound. 3 weeks had passed since our return from the compound, and Raven's Ridge had transformed into something resembling a fortress. New security protocols governed every aspect of daily life, while our intelligence network worked around the clock to identify the conspiracy that had targeted our family. I stood in the nursery, watching Mabel sleep peacefully in her crib, while monitoring the subtle energy connection that linked her to Sabine. Even in sleep, both children radiated the contentment of a shared bond that transcended physical distance. "Any changes, Dr. I?" Martinez asked, as she completed her weekly examination of both girls. "Stronger every day," I replied, noting how the healing energy flowed between them in perfect balance. "They're going to be formidable when they're older." Sabine sat in the corner playing with toys Luna had brought for her, her recovery so complete it seemed impossible she had ever been dying. The regional council had granted temporary custody to our pack while Fenwick's situation was resolved, allowing the girls to remain together during the investigation. "Where's Daddy today?" Sabine asked, looking up from her coloring book. "Meeting with the council members," I explained gently, helping them understand how the bad people tricked him. The truth was more complex. Fenwick's testimony about the intermediaries had revealed connections to supernatural organizations across 3 countries. What had begun as a desperate father's attempt to save his daughter had exposed a network dedicated to harvesting hybrid abilities through manipulation and exploitation. Caspian entered the nursery carrying official documents that bore the seal of the regional council. His expression was carefully neutral, but through our mate bond, I sensed his satisfaction with the outcome. "The council's decision?" I asked. "Supervised rehabilitation, community service focused on protecting vulnerable children, and permanent advisory status on cases involving parental exploitation," he announced. "Fenwick keeps his daughter and gets the chance to make amends. And the conspiracy investigation?" "Expanding. We've identified similar operations in 7 other territories, all following the same pattern: cursing children to force parents into compliance." Caspian's expression darkened. "It's going to take years to completely dismantle their network. But we've made significant progress," Caspian continued, consulting additional reports. The information Fenwick provided led to coordinated raids across 4 countries. 12 high-level conspirators are in custody, and we've traced their financial networks back to 3 major supernatural trafficking organizations. 2 of the mystical mediators who manipulated Fenwick were arrested in Prague last week. I felt a surge of satisfaction at the news. What about the facilities? 7 research compounds identified and shut down, with evidence of similar child exploitation programs. The conspiracy is badly damaged, though not completely destroyed. His expression grew serious. "They'll rebuild, but it will take them years to regain their previous capabilities." Sabine had moved to stand beside Mabel's crib, her small hand resting gently on the railing as she hummed a lullaby. The sight never failed to amaze me. 2 children from different worlds, brought together by tragedy, now inseparably connected by healing and love. "Will we stay here?" Sabine asked, not looking away from the sleeping baby. "For as long as you want," I assured her. "This is your home now, and Mabel is your sister." Through the window, I could see Fenwick walking across the compound with Owen. Both men engaged in intense discussion about security improvements. The broken alpha who had kidnapped our daughter was gone, replaced by someone determined to ensure no other parent would face the impossible choices he had confronted. "Sophie," Dr. Martinez said quietly, reviewing her examination notes. "There's something else. The energy patterns I'm detecting suggest that both children's abilities will manifest much earlier than normal." "How much earlier?" Caspian asked. "Mabel could begin showing conscious healing abilities within the next 6 months. Sabine is developing enhanced intuition and possibly precognitive flashes." The implications were both exciting and concerning. Exceptional children would always be targets for those who sought to exploit supernatural abilities, but they would also be uniquely equipped to protect themselves and others. "Then we'll be ready," I decided. Whatever gifts they develop, they'll learn to use them responsibly and safely. As evening approached, Our extended family gathered for dinner in the main hall. Fenwick had earned his place at our table through his willingness to face consequences and work toward redemption. Sabine chattered happily with Luna about her new coloring books, while Mabel dozed contentedly in my arms. "Any word from the tracking teams?" I asked Owen as he reported on the day's investigations. 3 more facilities identified, all abandoned but containing evidence of similar research programs, he replied. "Whatever organization was behind this, they're going underground until the attention dies down." The raids also freed 6 other children who had been targeted for similar exploitation, he continued. All have been reunited with their families and are receiving specialized care to address any supernatural trauma they experienced. "Let them run," Caspian said with quiet authority. "We'll be waiting when they surface again." After dinner, I carried Mabel upstairs to her nursery, where Sabine was already waiting with a picture book she'd chosen for their bedtime story. The ritual had developed naturally over the past weeks. Sabine would read to Mabel, even though the baby couldn't understand the words, strengthening the bond between them. "Once upon a time," Sabine began, her 7-year-old voice carrying the serious tone children use when performing important duties, "there was a brave little princess who could heal anyone with her magic touch." I settled into the rocking chair to listen, watching my daughter's face as she responded to Sabine's voice with obvious recognition and affection. Whatever challenges lay ahead, whatever enemies might target our family in the future, these 2 children would face them together. "And they lived happily ever after," Sabine concluded, closing the book with satisfaction. "Just like us, right?" "Just like us," I agreed, though I knew our story was far from over. As I tucked both girls into their beds, Sabine had requested a cot in Mabel's room so they could be close. I reflected on how much our lives had changed. 3 weeks ago, we had been a family in crisis. Now we were something larger, a chosen family bound together by shared trauma and mutual protection. Caspian appeared in the doorway, his presence immediately comforting as he surveyed our sleeping daughters. "Any regrets?" he asked quietly. "About saving them both?" "Never." I moved into his arms, feeling the completeness that only came when our family was safe and together. "About taking on the responsibility of raising them both?" "Ask me in 16 years. Through the nursery window, I could see the lights of Raven's Ridge spread across the valley, each one representing a pack member committed to protecting what we had built together. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new threats, and new responsibilities. But tonight, our children slept peacefully, connected by bonds that transcended blood and strengthened by love that had survived the worst kind of testing. The conspiracy that had targeted us was still out there, but we were ready for whatever came next. Because some families are forged in crisis and tempered in love, becoming stronger than the sum of their parts. And some bonds, once formed, can never be broken.